Hello, I'm Laura Ingle in for Arthel Neville. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's News Headquarters.
Hello again, Laura. And hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn. Topping the news this hour, the big news in France, where centrist Emmanuel Macron will be the next president of that country. You know, he's 39 years old, and he defeated right-wing populist Marine Le Pen in that hard-fought campaign, his victory giving the European Union a major sense of relief.
And in Washington, round one in the battle over health care reform is in the books. Now it's on to the Senate as President Trump and the Republicans gear up for a new push.
And sadly, the death toll is reportedly climbing as mass protests intensify and continue in Venezuela. The socialist government there finding itself increasingly under siege. America's News Headquarters starts right now.
We begin with the election day in France, where the people have spoken. Centrist Emmanuel Macron will be the country's next president, defeating nationalist candidate Marine Le Pen by a decisive margin. Voters flooding to the polls in one of France's most unpredictable and consequential elections in its history.
You know, it's been a very bruising and divisive campaign right until the very end, with protests breaking out in Paris against Le Pen and her nationalistic views on immigration and the European Union. Macron's victory marking a setback for those populist forces that earlier led to Brexit in Great Britain, and some say to the election of President Trump here in the United States. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott live right now tonight in Paris, where the Eiffel Tower certainly seems to be celebrating, as well as those on the street, as we await the president-elect Macron to come to the Louvre. Hi, Greg.
Absolutely, Eric. A lot of people excited here. Just 2 hours since the polls have closed. We're hearing honking on the streets and the motorcade of Emmanuel Macron, the president-to-be, just passing not too far from where we are, heading to a big made-for-TV rally right in the front of the Louvre Museum. But again, Macron defeating, according to the exit polls, which are pretty solid, the populist rival Marine Le Pen. The figures seem to be very straightforward. They're giving Macron about 65% of the vote, Le Pen getting 35%. Voters going for a 39-year-old moderate. He is pro-NATO, pro-European Union, and he's promising a program of reform in the modern political history of France. Just to put this in perspective, he is the youngest president, and he is the first president in this post-war period that comes from not a major party. He is independent. Le Pen, well, she's a nationalist, a protectionist, and her message played very well in parts of the country that were hard hit by an economy that has been stagnant for years and years. She was a critic of the European Union, at the Euro, and she still is, as we heard a bit tonight. Her hard line, too, about immigration and her tough talk about terrorism also played in parts of this country, or the whole country, which has been hit by terrorism. She claims she got 11 million votes, and she claims she's going to be fighting on. Let's hear a little bit from Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen in her speeches tonight. We actually heard a little bit of that. Emmanuel Macron giving a very broad message, an inclusive message about the future of France and about his program. Marine Le Pen talking about reaching out to the president, but also president-to-be, but also talking about concerns about the Macron presidency as well. When we were out at the polling stations, we also saw another concerning trend, a lower than average turnout, and also a lot of abstentions, people putting in blank papers into the voting boxes. A lot of people unhappy with both of these candidates. And remember, they turned out both of the candidates from the major parties in the first round of voting here and went for a lot of outsiders as well. Finally, we are expecting this Macron event shortly. We're expecting him once again to reach out for unity. He's got a tough job ahead of him to try to come through with some of the reforms that he is promising, as well as bringing together a fractured country. This, of course, Eric, is being watched very closely by Washington. France is an absolutely key ally to the United States, important in the fight on terror, an important member of NATO, also also an important seat taken at the UN Security Council, an important economic partner as well, a member of the European Union, probably. Although President Trump spoke favorably from time to time about Marine Le Pen, some reassuring feelings also, not just from Washington, but probably from Wall Street, too. We're looking at the stock markets going to for this more moderate choice, something they know rather than something unknown, which Marine Le Pen would have been. But again, we heard from her tonight. She's not gone yet. She is going to be in the opposition. It's going to be an interesting future here, Eric.
That's for sure. We just saw a glimpse, Greg, for a moment of, we believe, is Macron's motorcade as they head toward the Louvre. And you mentioned, look, there it is there. I mean, the French do so many things well. They cook well, they make great wine, and look at French television news. You would not see that in America. A live, continued broadcast riding along in the motorcade as it happens of the president. I mean, we just don't do that, and we'll see if he gets out of that one of those vehicles he's behind. But you mentioned Le Pen. She may have lost, yes, but she certainly hit a nerve, considering the terrorist activities and the attacks that France has gone under. And she got about 35% of the vote. That's more than double than the National Front previously. So, as you said, she is vowing to come back in 5 years. What's her future?
Well, her future is strong. We're even hearing that she might refashion her National Front Party, even give it a different name. She clearly, and she stated this tonight, she sees herself now as the main opposition party and figure to Macron and his newly fashioned party. So she has a future. Her message played well in the Rust Belt of France, which will sound familiar to our American viewers, the steel mill towns with the mills closed, the coal mining towns that don't dig any coal anymore, and also on the front lines of the immigration battle in the southern part of this country and all across this country. Terror is a major concern, and she hits at all of those. Her rhetoric, though, just a bit too polarizing in this campaign. It got to be a very nasty battle, especially in the last couple of days, and she lost quite a bit of support in a very tough debate that she was involved in with Macron a couple of days ago. But Macron's will have the job now, and he will have quite a task on his hands, Eric.
Greg, thank you. We're now looking live right outside of the Louvre, for those who know that IMP design pyramid. That crowd eagerly awaiting the president-elect of France, Emmanuel Macron. And, of course, when he steps up to the podium on the stage to address his supporters, we will bring that to you live. Greg Palkot, we will also continue with you. Thank you for the very latest as we await President-elect Macron to speak.
And you made a good point, Eric, with those reporters in that motorcade. I saw one with a microphone on back of a motorcycle. We'll have to do that in our next field reporting. All right, Washington also watching the outcome of this important election as French voters show overwhelming support for Emmanuel Macron. His victory solidifying France's place in the European Union. But what will that all mean for the country's relationship with the U.S.? Our friend Kristen Fisher is live from the White House today. Kristen, all right, how's the White House responding so far?
Hey, Laura. Well, we just got our very first response from the White House about 30 minutes ago, and it came from President Trump himself on Twitter, of course. He said, quote, "Congratulations to Emmanuel Macron on his big win today as the next president of France. I look very much forward to working with him." Now, President Trump never explicitly endorsed Macron's opponent, Marine Le Pen, but ideologically, they are very closely intertwined. They're both strong on borders, tough on immigration, very different from former President Barack Obama, who endorsed the more moderate candidate, Emmanuel Macron. In fact, he went so far as to declare his support in a video released just 3 days ago. Watch this.
He has stood up for liberal values. He put forward a vision for the important role that France plays in Europe and around the world. And he is committed to a better future for the French people. He appeals to people's hopes and not their fears.
So this election in France really became kind of a proxy war between former President Barack Obama and President Trump. Laura?
Yeah, Kristen, when we look back at history, how unusual is it for a former U.S. president to weigh in on a foreign election, especially like that?
It's very unusual, but, it really does just show you how high the stakes were here. I mean, if Le Pen had won, she had promised to pull France out of the European Union, pull France out of NATO. After Brexit, that would have been devastating, if not a fatal blow to the EU. But as Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, pointed out this morning, that was a vote that the former president got wrong.
President Obama hasn't had a very good recent track record electorally, and he really dismissed Brexit, which of course was a huge success. I think they're missing what's going on all across Europe, which is, and the world, frankly, where people are just telling the establishment, stop telling me who to be, what to think, how to worship, how to raise my children, where my hard-earned money should go. People are really asking for sovereignty and security.
But in the end, with Macron's victory and Le Pen's defeat, this turned out to be one vote that former President Obama got right. Laura?
All right, Kristen Fisher for us at the White House today. Thank you so much. Eric?
Well, meanwhile, President Trump is urging today Senate Republicans to, quote, not let the American people down, he says, when it comes to overhauling the U.S. healthcare system. The president's saying the current system, in his view, is failing as insurers pull out of markets, forcing costs and deductibles up. This as that health bill heads to the Senate next after it cleared the House last Thursday. And in the Senate, there are major changes expected. Brian Yennis has been following the president at his weekend retreat, his New Jersey golf club in New Jersey, and he joins us now with the latest. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Eric. Well, look, the president and the Trump administration say that they have confidence and they are expressing optimism that they believe this health care bill will survive and go through Congress. The bottom line is though the president's chief of staff, Reince Priebus, spoke to our Chris Wallace and even downplayed this notion that this House bill will actually harm Republicans in the 2018 midterms. In fact, he says already we've seen negative backlash at town halls for Republicans, Raul Labrador and Tom Reed, and Republicans passed this bill by the slimmest of margins. They needed 216 votes and got 217. But Priebus says, look, Republicans are not in danger.
Sometimes in life you have to do what's right, not what's politically expedient. We believe this is going to be a better product, and by the time that people see that the premiums are lower, that it's a better service, there are more options, more choices, they're going to reward the Republicans that stood up and said, we're not going to see the Obamacare system, which is failing and collapsing, continue any longer.
Priebus went on to say that he expects Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to work with Senate Republicans to come up with improvements to the original House bill. The question is, what kind of changes are we going to see to the bill? We've already seen a number of Senate Republicans speak out against the bill. One of the concerns are the Medicaid cuts. We're talking about $880 million over the course of 10 years, which means you have millions of Americans who received insurance through Medicaid expansion under Obamacare who will be left without insurance. Well, the Health Secretary Tom Price saying on another network earlier today, that's not true. These same Americans will be able to purchase their health care at the state level.
Absolutely not. And we believe strongly that the Medicaid population that will be cared for in a better way under our program, because it'll be more responsive to them. These decisions will be made closer to them. Right now, you've got Washington, D.C. dictating to the states and dictating to patients exactly what must occur.
Meanwhile, Sally Yates, the former U.S. attorney in Obama's Justice Department, who was the acting attorney general before being fired by President Trump 10 days into his term, will testify to Congress tomorrow about Russia. Yates says she warned the White House back in January that she feared National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was compromised and vulnerable to blackmail after he had private conversations with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Flynn was later fired, while the president earlier today tweeting his frustration that 6 months after the election, we are still talking about Russia. In a tweet, quote, the president saying, when will the fake media ask about the Dems' dealings with Russia and why the DNC would not allow the FBI to check their server or investigate? The president will be back in Washington, D.C. tonight. Eric?
All right, Brian, we'll be talking to Judy Miller later on in the newscast about those results. Thank you. Laura?
And a raging wildfire shuts down a nature preserve and forces people from their homes. It's a big mess. An update on the fight to contain the fire.
And we'll have more on the landslide victory for Emmanuel Macron in the French presidential election. You're looking live at the Louvre, where people right now, his supporters and others, are waiting for their president-elect to speak. When he steps up to the podium and the stage there, we will bring it to you. And we will later ask how his election will affect the rest of Europe and our country. We will break all of this down straight ahead here on the Fox News Channel. We're now waiting for French President-elect Macron to speak at the Louvre, and when he does, we will bring that to you. But first, here's a quick check of the headlines. One person was killed, another wounded after gunshots rang out on the Las Vegas Strip last night. Police reportedly indicate that there may have been two shooters. It happened outside the Hilton Grand Vacations Hotel, and they think it may have been gang-related. The Starkey Wilderness Park Nature Preserve near Tampa, Florida, has been evacuated. That's because of wildfires that are still blazing inside the preserve. The police also had to temporarily evacuate surrounding residential areas before crews were able to contain the fire within that area. And there's been a gruesome double murder in Boston last night. Two doctors who were engaged to be married were found dead in their luxury apartment. Their throats had been slashed. Police say a suspect has been arrested after he was wounded in a shootout with police. No known motive as of now.
And France's presidential runoff resulting in a victory for centrist Emmanuel Macron, a political novice who has no ties to any of France's major political parties. So how will that pan out for Macron when work begins with the French parliament? And what does the election result mean for France's relationship with the rest of the world, especially the U.S.? Joining me now, Joe Twyman, head of political and social research for Europe at YouGov. Welcome. We have got a lot to talk about. A big day of breaking news, a substantial win for Macron today with just over 65% of the vote. A non-politician, as I mentioned, who campaigned on a pro-EU platform. So first, Joe, I just want to get your reaction.
Well, not just a non-politician, a former investment banker. And this really characterises the unusual nature of the entire contest. The two main parties in France unable to get through to the second round. And it's often said that in the first round you choose and in the second round you eliminate in the French elections. And that's certainly what happened. This wasn't really a surprise. A lot of the polls had predicted a figure around this. But it was still an interesting conclusion to a contest that has been characterised by its anti-establishment position, not just from Marine Le Pen, a political outsider, but from Emmanuel Macron, as you say, a 39-year-old political novice who has never held elected office before.
What does this do to France's foreign policy now? You know, U.S. relations moving forward, France's relationship with NATO, even the EU and Russia as well. Where does it stand?
Well, it raises interesting questions, but I don't expect to see significant change. Emmanuel Macron was, in fact, the only candidate to be very positive about France's membership of NATO. He's extremely pro-European Union, again, in opposition to his opponent. And he's also a fan of internationalisation and globalisation. In contrast, however, he has been, shall we say, sceptical, along with many political figures in France of President Trump, but I am certain that he will want to work with the American administration and indeed American politics to move things forward.
There's been a lot of talk, Joe, about his stance on immigration and also on fighting terrorism in France. That's also going to be a top priority. You know, when we look at the stats, more than 320 people have died in terror attacks in the country since 2015. So how do you think Macron will tackle this growing threat, talking just about terrorism right now?
Well, it's worth remembering that France has been under a state of emergency since November 2015, and security was one of the main issues of the campaign. It's difficult to know exactly how this will pan out. Marine Le Pen talked about very hard border controls and cracking down on immigration. Emmanuel Macron has been certainly less effusive about that, but also in his pro-EU stance, he has promoted very much the ideals of freedom of movement across the EU, including Britain, while it still becomes a member, while it still stays a member of the EU. So exactly how that plays out remains to be seen. But he certainly has to get hold of security and terrorism as an issue if he's to build on the momentum from the victory that he's achieved today.
You know, we have been leading up to this in our coverage, talking about the concern about that hack of last week's Macron's campaign with a ton of real and fake information that was leaked out, which looks like it didn't matter much to voters, did it?
Well, the election laws in France are quite complicated, but one of the things that you can't do is any kind of coverage of political issues for 2 days before the polls are open. And so this news broke, but it wasn't covered in the French newspapers. Now, inevitably, of course, there was social media chatter and that sort of thing, but it doesn't seem to have had a massive impact. In fact, there are rumours on social media that the Macron team suspected that a hack would take place, and so flooded their servers with false information and false documents to prevent themselves from being affected too much, expecting that as an opponent of Marine Le Pen, who was supported by Vladimir Putin, an attack or a hack may have come.
You know, we've been looking at these live pictures coming out of Paris. There's a very loud and celebratory mood being displayed in Paris right now, as we are seeing. But Macron now inherits a pretty difficult economic situation. You look at the high youth unemployment and an aging population. So how do many believe he will handle those issues? They're big ones.
Well, the big question is public sector reform of government spending and issues like that, which in the past have proved extremely controversial in French politics. But Emmanuel Macron has committed himself to public sector reform. But as you say, with an economic situation that is at best improving, but many say actually not changing very much at all, it remains to be seen what he can do. Employment is around about 10%. Youth unemployment is much higher. And that perhaps helps to explain why support for Marine Le Pen was actually higher among young supporters, in contrast to what we've seen in similar elections both across Europe and in America. And so where he goes from here with the economic situation, which will be front and centre along with security, immigration, terrorism and the EU, will really define his presidency. But it's worth pointing out that the French themselves have a legislative election in June. Emmanuel Macron's party, En Marche, currently holds only 2 seats of 500 odd that are up for grabs. And so the degree to which he can build momentum, not just for himself but also for his party, is a big question that hangs over the next few months.
Joe Twyman, thank you so much for being here. Great perspective, a lot to get to, a lot going on in the world today, and as always, thanks for being here. Eric.
Thank you.
Well, Laura, meanwhile, we wait for President-elect Macron to speak. President Trump is making a major push for Middle East peace. You know, he's preparing for his first overseas trip. He's going to Israel and, we are told, the West Bank. Could his new approach actually break the decades-long stalemate between Israel and the Palestinians? Israeli government minister Naftali Bennett is here to tell us.
And what we need is a new Marshall Plan, or if you will, a Trump plan. And it would include massive entrepreneurship. That's what we do in Israel. That's our secret in Israel. The startup nation is an entrepreneurship nation. And we could do amazing stuff.
More now on our top story. Emmanuel Macron, the centrist and political newcomer, defeating nationalist candidate Marine Le Pen to become France's next president. But even with the votes counted, the mood in France is far from settled after such a bitter and divisive campaign. Ashley Webster, live in Paris for us to tell us how it's going there so far. Hi, Ashley.
Hi there, Laura. Yes, I'm just about a block away from the Louvre where Emmanuel Macron is having his party tonight. Literally thousands of people swarming into the area, waving their flags, their French flags, very, very happy. The margin of victory, we knew he was the clear favorite going in, Macron, but he wins 65-35, not even close. And, of course, the people, as I say here, very happy. But you're absolutely right, Laura, a very bitter, very angry and downright ugly, you could say, campaign between these two, and it does expose some of the divisions within the country. Of course, Marine Le Pen was anti-immigration, close the borders, get out of the Eurozone, dump the euro, and so on. Whereas Emmanuel Macron, very much pro-Eurozone, pro-free trade. And, of course, I would imagine the people in Brussels and Berlin very happy tonight that Mr. Macron has won. We did see some protests throughout this week leading up to the election, but the protests have been really by people who don't like either candidate, either Mr. Macron or, Marine Le Pen. We understand there's a big protest scheduled for tomorrow in the center of Paris. But like it or not, Mr. Macron, a political newcomer for the most part, the youngest president in French history ever at 39 years old, world, the former investment banker. And guess what? The markets, the global markets will love this. The Dow futures already up 100 points. The markets across Europe also moving higher, basically because they want stability. And Marine Le Pen and her plans for getting France out of the Eurozone would have created a lot of concern among investors. But that is not the case. People are happy here. We are waiting for Mr. Macron to come out and speak to the thousands of people. By the way, tomorrow is a holiday, Victory Day in France from World War II. And tomorrow Mr. Macron will be celebrating his victory as the new president-elect of France. Back to you.
All right, Ashley Webster for us, right in the middle of all the action. Thanks so much for that live report. Eric.
And Laura, for more on this and more on what Emmanuel Macron's victory means for Middle East peace, I'm joined by Naftali Bennett. He is Israel's Minister of Education, also a member of the Israeli Security Cabinet and leader of the Jewish Home Party. Mr. Minister, thank you for being here in person in New York.
Great being here.
Macron's victory. Look, he's for the two-state solution. He did say he would not unilaterally recognize the Palestinians, and he's been critical of the settlements. What's your reaction to his win?
Well, first of all, I congratulate the French people for making a very clear decision, and we certainly respect their decision. Macron has been a friend to Israel, and we certainly view him as such. He visited Israel about a year and a half ago. And I think the prospects in the Middle East are good, one way or another. We're on a very good track over the past few years. It's been tough, with ISIS and Iran, but we've got this strong country called Israel smack in the middle, and we're doing fine.
You mentioned his visit. That was 2015.
That's correct.
He was the minister of the economic minister under Hollande's administration, and when he went to Israel, he said something that was fascinating. He talked about an entrepreneurial empowerment of Bethlehem and of the West Bank. And you discussed that today at the Jerusalem Post event where you spoke here in New York. What is that? And that is different than the diplomatic stalemate that we've had all these decades.
Yeah, that's precisely right. I come from the high-tech arena. I spent a decade there. I believe the future of peace is an economic, entrepreneurial-based peace as opposed to political, diplomatic peace. We've been trying that route for so many decades, and it's not worked. What we need to do is focus on building up, bottom up, an economy for the Palestinians, for the Israelis together, industrial zones, high-tech. We can do so much. It's a good nation over there. We can do good stuff together.
Do you think the Palestinians can achieve that, and that is doable with the tensions and some of the hatreds, that maybe you can bypass the political aspect for now to help the people economically?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm confident that at the end of the day, people want good lives. They want good education for their kids. They want to have a good job, and that's things that we can achieve. So I would focus on that, and I think that real deal is what we need to achieve in the Middle East.
We are watching President-elect Macron at the Louvre as he takes that long walk up to the stage. We'll take his remarks in a minute, so we may have to interrupt you, Minister. Will this be something that President Trump will bring up or raise with your Prime Minister and maybe with Mr. Abbas, because we hear he may be going to Ramallah?
I believe so, and I think that's what President Trump ought to focus on economy, on strengthening the Middle East and fighting Iran. Iran and ISIS, those are the two big enemies in the Middle East. We have to deal with them and focus on that.
As we watch Mr. Macron walk the long walk, there's been the Western civilization and the bulwark of international affairs since World War II. Your nation, certainly a part of that after the independence of 48. What are your thoughts as we watch this transition tonight to a centrist, to someone who's more of a globalist and not as an isolationist as Marine Le Pen was?
Well, I think we're seeing global movements and contrasting vectors here. On the one hand, people want to keep their identity, their unique identity. On the other hand, they do want good lives. And what we're seeing all across the world is that tension. I think this is good news for Europe, and we're very optimistic.
And France, of course, has had its attacks by the radical Islamic terrorists. And what is your advice? You served as a commando. You are in the cabinet for security for Israel. As Western nations, what should we do?
A, first, face reality as it is. Don't make up a false reality. And B, fight those terror cells where they emerge from. Don't wait for them to reach the streets. You can nip them in the bud.
Macron, in his earlier speech early this evening when he won, he mentioned the issue of terrorism several times. Of course, Le Pen would seem to be much more stronger on immigration and dealing with that. What is your advice for what we can do? What lessons can America take and the rest of the world from what you are doing in Israel? You've had the stabbings. There was one at the Damascus Gate today, an attempted stabbing. But you've been fairly successful.
Yeah, we have a thriving economy, even though we're threatened, using common sense. Common sense. It's not as if all the Arabs are our enemies, not at all. Not all the Muslims are our enemies, but to differentiate between the bad guys and the good guys. And I would say that would be the guiding principle.
So before we see him speak, your sense of what we can expect from the president's trip, our president, when he goes. He's going to go to Saudi Arabia, a new coalition of the Sunni Arab nations and Israel together fighting ISIS, but also Iran.
Yeah. Iran is the biggest problem. Make no mistake. ISIS is a problem. It's the smaller of the two devils. Iran is the big problem. We would expect Trump to re-engage and fight Iran. Not necessarily with military force, but with all the capabilities of soft power, hard power, and deal with that, and then we'll have a much more stable Middle East.
Does that mean sanctions? Does that mean maybe scuttling or at least reimagining the nuclear deal?
I think we have to take a very fresh look at the deal and see what elements are good and what are not, and fix it.
And what about the Iranian influence in Syria? And, of course, Hezbollah. The Israeli military took out a warehouse at the Damascus airport the other day, right after a cargo aircraft, flew in from Tehran, believed to have had missiles.
Iran's this octopus, and the head of the octopus is Iran, and it sends its arms all across the Middle East and the world. We got to deal with that.
Minister Naftali Bennett, I thank you. If you stay with us, we're now listening to the President-elect of France, 39-year-old Emmanuel Macron, who won tonight.
Of you, and I just see a few faces.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci d'être là.
Thank you for being here.
De vous être battu.
For having fought
courage et
with courage
pendant tant de mois.
For so many months.
Parce que oui, ce soir.
Because yes, tonight.
Vous l'avez emporté.
You have succeeded. France has succeeded.
Ce que nous avons fait.
What we've done.
Depuis tant et tant de mois,
for so many months,
n'a ni précédent,
has no precedent,
ni équivalent,
no equivalent.
Tout le monde nous disait
Everyone
que c'était
said to
impossible.
us that it was impossible.
Mais ils ne connaissaient pas la France.
They didn't know France.
Merci.
Thank you for your trust.
Merci du temps que vous
Thank
avez
you for
donné.
the time
Merci
that you've devoted. Thank you for your commitments to each and every one of you. Thank you for the risks that some of you have taken.
Je les sais.
I am aware of them.
Cette confiance,
this trust,
elle m'oblige.
means
J'en suis désormais
that I have certain responsibilities, and I am now responsible for not disappointing you, and I have to be capable of, through the 5 years to come, to have your spirit, your power, your momentum. I would also like tonight
avoir un mot
to say a word
pour les Français qui
to
ont
the
voté
French
pour moi
people who voted for
sans
me
avoir nos idées.
without necessarily having the same
Vous vous
ideas.
êtes engagés.
You committed yourselves,
Et je sais
and
qu'il ne
I
s'agit pas
am
là
aware
d'un blanc-seing.
that we're not just simply talking about something that was easy.
Pour les Français qui ont
I would like to
voté
say a word
simplement pour
to the
défendre
French people who
la
simply
République.
voted in order to be able to defend the Republic.
Face à l'extrémisme,
Faced with
je
extremism,
sais nos désaccords.
I know that we
Je les
have
respecterai.
certain disagreements, and
Et je
I will
serai
respect
fidèle
them, but I will also
à
be
cet engagement
loyal to that commitment that was
protégerai
made.
la République.
I will protect the Republic.
Et je veux enfin
And I would
avoir un
finally
mot
also like
ceux
to
qui
say a
ont
word
voté aujourd'hui
to those
pour Madame
who
Le Pen.
voted for Madame Le Pen today.
Ne les sifflez pas.
Don't boo
Ils ont exprimé.
them. They
Ils ont
expressed
exprimé aujourd'hui
today, they
une
expressed an anger
un désarroi, parfois des
that they
convictions.
were disappointed at times, certain convictions, and I respect them, and I will do my utmost during the 5 years to come to make sure that there will be absolutely no reason whatsoever to vote for extremists.
Ce soir,
tonight,
il n'y a que les Françaises,
they're just the French women and French men, the peoples of France, gathered together. And what you represent tonight here at the Louvre, you represent a certain fervour, enthusiasm, energy, the energy of the French people.
Et ce lieu,
and this place in which we find ourselves, expresses this. After all, our history, of the ancient regime, to the liberation of Paris, to the French Revolution, to the audacity of this pyramid, it's a place for all the French, all French men and French women. This place is the place which represents France that the world is looking at. Because after all, tonight, it's Europe and it's the world that's looking at us. Europe and the world are waiting, are expecting for us to defend everywhere the spirit of light, which is threatened in so many places. They're waiting that everywhere we defend the freedoms, that we protect those who are oppressed. They're expecting that we should carry new hope, give new hope, new humanism, that of a safer world, a world of defended freedoms, a world of growth, where there'll be more justice, more ecology, and they're expecting for us to be finally ourselves.
La tâche qui nous attend,
the task that we're faced with, my dear co-citizens, is enormous,
et elle commencera
and it will begin tomorrow, from tomorrow.
Elle imposera
it will mean that we will have to look at aspects relating to public life. We will have to defend our democratic vitality. We will have to reinforce our economy. We will have to build new protections of this world that surrounds us. And we'll have to give a place to each and everyone through school, work, culture. And we'll have to refound our Europe. And we'll have to ensure the safety of all the French people. And this task, which we're going to be having to deal with, is enormous. And it will mean that we'll have to carry on being audacious. Yes, tonight we have won a right which obligates us. And you've chosen audacity, and this audacity we will pursue it, and every single day to come we will carry on being audacious, because that's what the French men and women are expecting. Because after all, that's what Europe and the world is expecting from us. They are expecting that once again France will surprise them, that France be itself, and that's precisely what we will do. Our task is enormous, my friends, and it will require the commitment of everyone, the commitment of our armies, of our forces of law and order, all our public services, your commitment, each and every one of you, elected, those who are elected, associations, trade unionists, employees, civil servants, businessmen, craftsmen, farmers, students, those who are retired. Our task is enormous, and it will mean that we'll have to make sure that we'll be truthful, the courage of truth. During this campaign, we've constantly defended truth, and I will carry on defending truth on your behalf.
Notre tâche est immense.
Our task is enormous, and it will mean that we will build right from tomorrow a real majority, a strong majority.
Cette majorité
And this majority of change, that's what the country aspires to, and it's what the country deserves. This majority of change, that's precisely what I'm expecting from you in 6 weeks, because after all, once again, I'm going to need you.
Mes chers concitoyens,
my dear citizens,
vous toutes et tous,
all of you who are here at my side and who've been alongside me for so many days and so many nights, people of France gathered here together at the Louvre. We have the strength, we have the energy, we have the will, the one that has already carried us, that has made us who we are, and that's precisely what will lead us in the future. We won't give in to fear. We will not give in to division. We will not give in any way to lies. And we will not give in either to irony and to mockery, to the love of decline and defeat. I know that the fervor that you have, I know what I owe you, and I know that tonight what I owe to my companions, to my friends, to my family, and to those near and dear to me.
Ce ne sera pas
It won't be
tous les jours facile.
Easy every single day, and I know that.
La tâche
The
sera
task
dure.
will be tough.
Je vous dirai à chaque fois.
I will tell you every
La vérité.
time. I will tell you the truth every single time.
Mais votre ferveur,
But your fervor,
votre énergie,
your energy,
votre courage,
your courage
me porteront.
will always carry me.
Je vous protégerai
I will protect you.
face aux menaces.
Faced with threats,
Je combattrai pour vous
I will fight for
contre le
you
mensonge,
against lies,
l'immobilisme, l'inefficacité
inefficiency,
pour améliorer la vie
in
de
order to
chacun.
be able to improve the lives
Je
of each and
respecterai
every one of you. And I will
Chacune et
respect
chacun
each of you
dans ce qu'il pense.
with regard to what you think and what you
Je
defend.
rassemblerai
I will gather
et je
together
réconcilierai,
and I will
car je veux l'unité
try
de
to
notre
reconcile,
peuple
because
et
I
de notre
want the
pays.
unity of our people and of our
Et
country.
enfin, mes amis,
And finally, friends,
je vous servirai.
I will serve you.
Je vous servirai
I will serve you
avec humilité,
with humility,
avec force.
with strength.
Je vous servirai
I will
au
serve
nom de
you
notre
in the
devise
name
liberté,
of
égalité,
freedom, equality,
fraternité.
fraternity.
Je vous servirai
And I will serve you
dans la fidélité de la confiance
with
que vous m'avez
faith
donnée.
and
Je vous
in order to
servirai
respect the trust that
avec
you've
amour.
shown to me. And I will serve
Vive la
you with
République.
love. Long
Vive la
live the
France.
Republic and long live France.
That, of course, Emmanuel Macron and his wife, they met when she was his school teacher. That's right. She's 64 years old. He's 39. They're French. He's taken the reins of a divided nation. He's a young, dynamic leader who, as you just heard, admitted his task is enormous. He won on a platform of economic reform. The former finance minister under socialist President Hollande, he quit in protest before he founded his own party, his own movement. France has been hampered by slow growth, a 10% unemployment rate. He wants to simplify the tax system, cut corporate taxes, and trim what's seen as a lavish social system. Judy Miller joins us, adjunct professor at the Manhattan Institute, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, Fox News contributor. And Judy, as we see the new first couple of France, your thoughts?
Well, I think that if you've listened to the speech in French or in English, you understand how this 39-year-old ingenue, in a way, even though he was the finance minister under the socialist government, has managed in the space of 1 year to capture the imagination of the French people. Eric, he is so charismatic, and he speaks so beautifully, and he specifically told people not to boo those who voted for Le Pen. He said he was going to bring the country together and unite France. It was a unifying speech, and it was also a speech that reflected the audacity, a word he used, of a man who has upended French politics. I mean, he was neither a socialist nor a Republican. He is the new man. And what the French have done today is reject Europhobia, and they've rejected Islamophobia, and he gave a message of hope and reminded the French that they stand for liberty, equality, fraternity, human rights, which is kind of the opposite message that Rex Tillerson gave when he talked about American foreign policy. He said we were going to pursue interests. Macron has managed to talk about the hope that this election means for France. It's going to be really tough because this guy does not have a party, and by June, he has to put together enough candidates to be able to govern in the National Assembly, and that's going to be very, very tough. As he said, his task is enormous.
Well, they also have, this enormous social welfare type system. Some say immigrants, especially from North Africa, have not been treated as well, kind of a caste system in France. So how does he deal with those two tasks? How can he turn around the economy? And how can he deal with some of the ingrained social aspects of his nation?
It's going to be very tough because French unions are enormously powerful and the French interests are very powerful. And as somebody who worked in France, I know that it's virtually impossible to fire someone who works in a French office. So he's got to change all that to get the economy moving again. He's shown that he's willing to do that. That's why he quit President Hollande's government. He couldn't serve in a government that was so resistant to economic change. This guy is really very different. He breaks the mold from French politics. And he has to do all this while he's protecting the nation. Eric, he referred several times to the fact that I will protect you, I will defend you. That's going to be very hard with a lot of very disenchanted people who are living in the suburbs, many of whom happen to be Muslim, with a strong currents of Islamophobia in the country. This is an enormous balancing act for him.
And Judy, immigration was a very big point during this run-up to today's election. Talk to us about where he stands on that and moving forward, what we may see from him.
Well, he is totally different to Marine Le Pen in this. She said that her election was about patriotism versus globalism, portraying herself as the patriot. What he has said, what Macron has said, is that all French citizens are patriots and that he is not going to discriminate against people of the Muslim faith. This is a very powerful and important message right now, but he's got to make good on it. French security is extremely good, but look at what's happened in the past couple of years. So I think what he must show is that he's tough on security, but still dedicated to the ideals of immigré, that is the immigration culture that France represents.
All
Judy,
right.
thank you.
Judy, thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you very much.
Always appreciated. That does it for us.
An historic night to report to you, and it's not over yet. We'll be back here in 1 hour at 6 p.m. Eastern with the very latest on the French election and what we can expect next in the NATO and the EU. Stay with us, and thank you for spending time with us here on the Fox News Channel.